This is Ultra Blue Energy coming at you. What's good, peeps? Wonderful weather we're having. Let's talk about our superheroes. Some of your favorites, from the Cape Crusaders, to the patriotic uniforms, to the gods among us. All these men and women in costumes risk their very lives to make this world a better place, even if it takes certain measures. There is no doubt that these superb superheroes go through all kinds of hardships to keep the world safe. But do they all follow the right path in doing so? It's time to take a look at the moral standing of superheroes. Let's get this thing going. First things first, without outright naming any names, what do you think of when you imagine a hero? Many of you might have said a man in a cape or tights that soar throughout the skies. In a sense, you're only partially right, but it's not just about America's ass. Think of our heroes today: firefighters, doctors, police officers, soldiers at war. Just many of the men and women that risk their skins just to save lives. It's the people who genuinely want to do the right thing despite all odds stacked against them. A true hero must always have this mindset. Heroes in real life, and many superheroes too, have this position and must strive to keep it that way, no matter what happens. However, we as a human race go through many hard times and struggles, and our perspective of what is right and wrong could shift dramatically. Give it one bad day or a whole chain of events, and thoughts change, for better or for worse. Just like heroes in the real world, the concept of what our heroes perceive as the right thing is put to the test with every arc, every issue, every story. Now, there are more than plenty of superheroes I can talk about here. There is a lot, especially from Marvel and DC. There are heroes that fit the much preferred description of what a hero is supposed to be, and there are some that I question are even heroes in the first place. I am of course not going to talk about every single superhero, because at this point there are probably millions of them. I'll just be talking about the heroes that reach pop culture status. I could extend the topic for another day, maybe talk in depth about some superheroes. Really depends on what's on my mind. Now, when it comes to DC superheroes, many of them are straightforward on where they stand morally. Superman is the most obvious example of what a superhero is supposed to be. He is the paragon of all good. Not because he's some benevolent god, but it's because he was raised by good folk. Now, people tend to get quite bent out of shape when it comes to the character of Superman. He, out of many superheroes, bring the most powers, most insane, some outlandish, some straight up ridiculous. Okay, so that's that. Superman has so many powers, why doesn't he fix every problem? Why doesn't he stop wars, or solve world hunger, or any other problem? Here's the thing, Superman is not Jesus. Superman, try as he might, can't solve every problem. This is his burden. He has the power to solve everything, but can't solve everything. Because if he went out of his way to excessively solve everything, he'll end up like Injustice Superman. We know how that story goes, so this blue guy is gonna spare you the details. This Superman is an example of taking that burden to the extreme, in turn becoming what he was never meant to be, a malevolent weapon of persuasion. And this pretty much sums up the case for the Man of Steel, never going to unnecessary extremes, but always does what is needed for the betterment of the race that adopted him, never letting his absolute power corrupt. There are many examples of a Superman that went off the deep end, and I'm not talking about the current popular evil Superman, cause so help me I'm gonna talk about them in a future video. I'm talking about the many versions of Superman in the main Prime universe, such as Bizarro, Cyborg Superman, General Zod, Superboy Prime, and Elseworld Superman like Red Sun, Brutal, Ultraman, Lord Superman, and the previously mentioned Injustice Superman. Endless reminders for Superman to never let go of his morals, because he himself has seen what happens if he doesn't. These men have lost themselves to the power, because their mental resolve and sense of morality is weak. But Superman holds himself to a higher standard than all of them. For the well-being of the world, Superman in the DC universe holds influence, forever setting the precedent of many superheroes. While talking about DC superheroes, let's talk about Superman's soul brother Batman. Batman lives in a real messed up city, filled with deranged and psychotic criminals. Batman is in a position where he has to act accordingly. Batman has to be tough on his enemies. By tough, I mean use intimidating scare tactics. Batman has his ways of dealing with thugs in the streets of Gotham, and he makes sure they get the message. He plays his bad cop every time. Now in universe, Batman's methods, let alone the whole idea of him, is at odds with the citizens, especially the police. He traumatizes his villains, making sure they never forget their experience with the Dark Knight. Now, was using fear an effective tactic against bad guys? Well, in Batman's case, it works. In Gotham, criminals feel emboldened to do the things that they do because of the state of Gotham City and the effective, often inept police force. With the Batman amongst them though, they might as well retire their criminal careers. Now, of course, there is wide variety of rogues, the crooks who never give up, the bad guys who will always be around to torment Gotham. Batman's rogues deserve a whole video on its own, but I want to say only a few things here. One of the villains known to really test Batman is of course the Joker. The Joker is madness itself. Each and every time these two face off, the Joker always seeks to make the Batman snap, and in turn become as mad as him, effectively breaking Batman's no-kill rule. And we are heavily focusing on the no-kill rule because many superheroes follow this rule. It's always been a big debate in the history of comics, whether a superhero could kill his or her enemies or not. Ending a life is not a pretty thing to talk about. You could have a psycho piling bodies behind him and the hero would still hesitate to end his life. It's the kind of thing that could really haunt your conscience, and a hero is usually not seen as a hero when they take a life. Heroes are looked at with a skeptical eye as is, especially in the Marvel universe. But sometimes kills are warranted. Villains like Doomsday have to be put down, cause he's one of the deadliest things breathing. The Skrulls have to be dealt with for good, otherwise they'll take over the earth. Giant starfish are evil in the DC universe, and don't get me started on this grape flavored bastard. Yeah, sometimes you'd had no choice. However, all these characters I mentioned are extraterrestrials. Humans don't give a crap about aliens, they don't even belong on Earth. So let's tackle this kind of thing from a different angle. Bring on the Punisher. If you peeps don't know of the Punisher, I'm not gonna knock you. Basically, he's not a hero. He is what a vigilante actually is. He has no qualms whatsoever with killing his enemies. He cleans up these streets by painting them red. Imagine that. Now, what makes Frank Castle a vigilante? Well, it's no doubt that this guy has the biggest kill count of any superhero. Any other character might as well be a god committing global genocide or a Terminator of some sorts. But there is something else. Frank Castle is a man that is a side effect of an unreliable judicial system. When his family got caught in the middle of a gang war, he sought the help of the justice system, but to no avail. So in response to the incompetence, he took the law into his own hands, lethal force and all. To say the least, the Punisher is the most excessive superhero. Superheroes will never do what he does on a daily basis, in fear of bad public perception or stooping to the level of their enemies. Killing doesn't strike others as a go-to to solve all your problems, which is why the Punisher is such a controversial figure in the Marvel Universe and all of comics. Many other superheroes are willing to get lethal as well. Black Widow is basically a spy. Wolverine tends to get nasty with his claws, and with the dismay of Batman, the Red Hood has disregarded the no-kill code. These are all characters with little to no powers. God forbid you had any overwhelming power in these superhero universes, because it's easy for people to see you as a weapon of mass destruction. Beings with enhanced powers are looked at with a skeptical eye by at least a handful of the public, whether it's a hater like J. Jonah Jameson or a narcissistic freak like Lex Luthor. While the perception of everyone can't be changed, the public opinion on their local hero is important. Though public opinion can be wrong and not actually gather what the hero's purpose is. This is why a hero has to be as morally correct as possible and focus on everyone's well-being. Let's talk about great power and responsibility. You heard that phrase before. This is synonymous with the character Spider-Man. Though this phrase is for every superhero, I think nobody demonstrates it better than Spidey. Spider-Man is the archetype for the young teenage superhero. At least, that's the impression I get when they reboot him in every media. I ain't complaining though, because this formula works very well for the character. Spider-Man being a clumsy, awkward high school teenager means his moral compass can improve as he grows older, with each different experience broadening his realm of understanding, all the while balancing his education. Spider-Man throughout his journeys made terrible mistakes that are irreversible, with the obvious being the death of his uncle, A moment that would course correct his entire life into what it is today. Superheroes as a whole goes through an ongoing learning experience. This is more true for teenage superheroes than any other superhero. Now the DC and Marvel universe have a lot in common with one another. The most common saying that I might as well call a meme at this point is that DC are gods trying to be men and Marvel are men trying to be gods. I don't find this to be 100% the truth, but I do understand the sentiment. Looking at Superman, he is in fact a godlike being living amongst men, along with Wonder Woman, Aquaman, Martian Manhunter, and so forth. However, you have Batman, Green Arrow, The Flash, and all of the Lanterns who are regular people. So I don't get why this particular saying is even a thing. I guess it's because Marvel has more human characters, therefore they're more grounded in reality. I would disagree and say that both are grounded in their own unique ways despite origin. However, Marvel was created on the premise to be more down to earth with their superheroes, an antithesis to DC, to where all of their heroes are icons and lead by example. To many people, Marvel is more relatable than DC Comics would ever be. This isn't without its flaws though. The Avengers tend to have way more infighting than their DC counterparts. Members have more conflicting interests with one another. The Hulk literally has a bad temper tantrum every few stories and becomes a walking disaster. This kind of thing happens so many times that Hulk might as well be a part of a rogues gallery. The Hulk himself is just one example. There are also superhero groups like the Illuminati. Time and time again, these group of people have put the world in danger more than help it like they intend to. DC isn't innocent in this matter either. Batman, though reasonable, is actively creating ways to incapacitate his own allies, as if they were his enemies. While these contingency plans help in a way, in a scenario that superheroes do become evil, enemies can still gain access to them. And then bye-bye Justice League. There are many other quote-unquote superheroes I can call out on the spot, but I want to discuss a few events that'll really make you question your big-time favorites. We're going to jump into a key event in DC first. Flashpoint. The Flash has the ability to travel back in time, right? So comes the ethical question. If you had the opportunity to change the past for a better future, would you do it? For the most part, we focus on what we can change now, because once something happens, it's forever. The Flash in the events of Flashpoint decides, F this, I miss my mommy. And he alters the past to save her, but dooms the entire world in the process. And in this story, you get the dawn of the, it was me, Barry, internet meme. The good thing about this event though, is that the Flash learned his lesson. In fact, he learned a couple lessons. Number one, you can't trade one for a million, and number two, the past is forever. More or less the former than the latter. Good, smooth, nice, peachy. I can't say the same for these other events though. Marvel's Civil War is where Iron Man really shows his ass. Civil War is without a doubt the biggest hero-on-hero battle story ever. And it was all caused by Iron Man. This whole thing started with a group of superheroes failing to stop a supervillain and costing thousands of lives in the process. This event will send shockwaves across America, making people question superheroes. Iron Man proceeds to make the worst decision in his entire career. He, along with the SHIELD organization, formed the Superhuman Registration Act, a legislative bill that enforces the mandatory registration of superpowered individuals. This one act would divide the superhero community, and after that is when things went to hell. Any superhero not registered would be hunted down like dogs and thrown in the negative zone. Any superhero who would abide by this law might as well have had their life ruined then and there. This incited a powerful backlash from the other superheroes, and multiple clashes ensued. Iron Man is already in bad territory right here, but it gets even worse. To make sure his side has the advantage in these encounters, he created a robot Thor. And when things got heated, this clone Thor killed the superhero known as Goliath. Then when the other superheroes turned on Iron Man, he proceeded to recruit supervillains. Yeah, at this point, you'd have to be a real lunatic to side with Iron Man. And despite everything that went down, he still believes that he was the one in the right. This whole comic was an Iron Man villain arc. Like, this was terrible. It's probably not compared to what I'm about to talk about next. We're jumping into two different mutant events: Avengers vs. X-Men and House of M. Both of these stories have innocent mutants killed. In Avengers vs. X-Men, it's Cyclops who goes off the deep end. Cyclops was always a Boy Scout, but these events completely 180'd his position when he betrayed all of the X-Men and killed Professor X. After this, he would become a full-fledged villain, even joining the likes of Magneto. And he remained this way until his death. Then there's the infamous House of M. Really, I want to talk about the Scarlet Witch. Like, this chick is legit insane. I don't even know why people are considering her a so-called hero. She does way more harm than any other superhero. She altered reality many times over because she was in a bad mood. Namely, that one time when she wiped out a whole gene pool with words. One minute she's good, and another she turns coat. Honestly, Wanda is more of a liability hazard than a superhero, which is why I'm like, geez, just keep her a villain and stop wasting everyone's time. Like, I'm tired of superheroes fighting each other like enemies. Now, there's one more event that I want to talk about, and it's a DC story. It's called Identity Crisis. This is one of the most controversial Justice League stories ever. This story is like Civil War, but it's a lot more internal. The premise involved using Zatana's magic to lobotomize Dr. Light, involuntarily, by the way. Already, this is just something that you just don't do to anyone, villain or not. But there was something else that really made me go, what the fuck? They also did the same thing with Batman, because they know he'll figure it out. Really, the main perpetrator here is Green Arrow, who was all too willing to hide this bad deed, so the Justice League could move on with no consequence. Despite using powers to violate a person, secretly and subtly at that. Now you see why Batman keeps contingency plans? This was a dark story to say the least. Sometimes heroes could really drop the ball. Now there are many more stories I can talk about involving superhero morality and stories where they do a heel turn. But I don't want to make this video longer than it needs to be. Honestly, I like it when a hero's morality is challenged because it makes heroes find ways to solve these problems. This video really came up because the morality of the superheroes between the two big companies came to mind. When I went over this whole video, I noticed that DC heroes tend to handle themselves better than Marvel heroes when it comes to these big stories. Nowadays, events in Marvel tend to change their superheroes in a bad way, and they fight each other more. For the most part though, their morality remains consistent to keep the image they represent. I'll think about this video when I'm writing my own thing. With that being said, make sure you keep sight of what's right, no matter what you're going through. Cool? Cool. This is UltraBlueENERGY, blasting off.